So, good afternoon, everyone. At least it's afternoon where I am in Glasgow, in the UK. My name
Good
is Suzanne
afternoon.
Gaida. Good afternoon. And I'm very, very pleased to be moderating this session on Arabic YA with the title Young Adult Literature, Fantastic Worlds and Where to Find Them. So, the body of Arabic YA remains relatively small. We definitely want more of it. So, all the aspiring writers out there, please write more Arabic YA. But having said that, it does have a relatively long history. So going back to at least around the turn of the 20th century, and it's existed in many different forms. So short stories, book series, magazines, standalone novels. And it's also a category that's constantly evolving, thanks in part to the people that we'll be having in the panel this afternoon. And we're having more authors turning their hands to writing YA. Sometimes they come by way of writing picture books and then they move on to YA. Sometimes they start with YA. It doesn't matter where they start as long as they continue to write. And these books are more and more dealing with contemporary issues. So the participants in this panel are three authors who first started writing for young adults in the past 10 years. In the case of at least Tagreed, I know, and maybe Maria, you've been producing content for young people earlier than that. But the writing for YA only happened relatively. The three participants are Tagreed al-Najjar from Jordan by way of Palestine, Maria Da'doush from Syria, and Mr. Ahmed Salah al-Mahdi, I hope I said your name correctly, from Egypt. The way the session will be structured is that we will be starting with readings. Each author will read an excerpt from one of their works, and then I will ask one or two questions to each. And then we will move to more general questions to the panel as a whole. And then in the last bit, we will be receiving questions from the audience and asking them to either individual authors or all of the authors. It depends on the question. So we're going to start in the readings. We're going to start with Tagreed, if that's okay. So I will do a brief introduction about you, Tagreed. Tagreed al-Najjar is a pioneer of modern children's literature in Jordan. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe you wrote your first book for children in 1978.
That's true.
Yes, she is the author of, yes. She's the author of over 50 books for children and young adults. She has twice been awarded the Etisalat Award for Arabic Children's Literature and has been shortlisted 3 times. Her children and young adult novels have been widely celebrated by readers, adopted as part of the curriculum by schools across the Middle East, as well as beyond that. And they've been translated into English, Swedish, Turkish, French, and Chinese. She's also the founder of As-Salwa Publishers, where you publish most of your books, and you're also publishing works by other authors. So over to you, Tagreed. If you can also tell us, the book the excerpt is coming from and sort of its location in the story.
Okay, right. Well, the excerpt I'm going to read to you today is from my latest novel, which is called Whose Doll Is This? And this novel was inspired by a family photo, the photo of my family in Haifa in the 1930s. And the whole family was there. And one was my mother, who was then 6 or 7 years old. And I was fascinated by this picture. Had it for a long time, but every time I would look at it, I would see my mother who's sitting holding her doll on the chair, looking at me with piercing eyes. I think they used to put kuhl in the eyes, so that made her look even more. And she was kind of begging me to write a story. This story is not a biographical, it's about her or about the doll or about something. This is a picture of my mother. Took it from the family photo and for the cover of the story. I have to be clear, this is not a biographical story, so it's not a story about my mother's family. But although it's not a biographical story, there's a lot of true things in it, things that happened to a lot of people around that time. So it has both. The novel is about 3 Palestinian women, 3 generations of Palestinian women in the diaspora, in Chicago to be exact. The grandmother and the daughter and the granddaughter. And the story takes us and tells us what happens when they leave Palestine for safety, going away from the war to Lebanon. And we get the story back in flashback and in real time. and it all unfolds to us slowly about what happened to this family. I chose the chapter that describes the moment they left Palestine or Jaffa to go to Beirut for safety. And in this chapter, the grandmother is talking. There's a conversation between the grandmother and the doll that miraculously came back to her. And she feels as though this doll is kind of asking her why she didn't take her with her when they left Jaffa, why she left her there. And through this explanation, we understand what happened to the family and how they felt when they had to leave Jaffa and go to Beirut. Yeah. So,
just a note, Tagreed will be reading in Arabic, but for those of you who don't understand Arabic, you will find a translation of it, I think, in the chat, translation into English.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tagreed.
عنوان الفصل: لا حاجة للكلام. نظرت ليلى إلى الدمية الجالسة أمامها وخاطبتها بغضب: ماذا أنت صامتة؟ تكلمي معي مثل ما كنت تتكلمين معي وأنا طفلة. تذكرين عندما كنا نجلس تحت الطاولة الكبيرة في غرفة الطعام وشرشف الطاولة الكروشيه يظللنا من كل جوانب، فتصبح المساحة بين الكراسي مكانا آمنا خاصا بنا لا يشاركنا في أحد. هل أنت غاضبة مني لأنني تركتك إياه؟ لا تغضبي مني، فلم يكن بمقدوري أن آخذك. لقد تركت دفتر مذكراتي أيضا، كنت ما أغلى ما أملك. تذكرين أصوات طلقات الرصاص في المدينة والانفجارات المتتالية؟ كنت أحضنك وأشد عليك بكل ما أوتيت من قوة. تذكرين الشعور المستمر بالرعب ونحن نسمع عن أعداد الذين قتلوا والذين طردوا من بيوتهم. كنت صغيرة وقتها، ولكن ما حصل انطبع في ذاكرتي. كيف نجا أبي من رصاصة مرت بالقرب من رأسي؟ كيف أصرت أمي عندما حان وقت الرحيل على أن تسقي النباتات وتغطي الأكلات حتى تحميها من الغبار؟ كيف أسرعت أمي تملأ حقيبة واحدة بما نحتاج إليه من ملابس، ووالدي يصر على أن حقيبة واحدة فقط يسمح بها على القارب إلى بيروت؟ كيف ضربت أمي كفا بكف وقالت: 4 أولاد وأنا وأنت بحقيبة واحدة، أيعقل هذا؟ رد والدي: سنشتري كل ما نحتاج إليه في بيروت، لا تقلقي. غمضي عين وفتحي عين ونكون رجعنا على يافا، أصلا بيتنا هون وشغلي هون وكل حياتنا هون. بكيت لأنني لم أستطع أن أخذك معي، ولأن أمي رفضت أن تأخذ فستان العيد القبة الدانتيل الذي لبسته عندما جاء مصور إلى بيتنا. كان البحر يعج بدموع الناس التي تبحث عن طريق الخلاص من جحيم الحرب والعدوان، حيث كانت قوات الهجنة والبلماح تلاحقهم وتطلق عليهم الرصاص لتحثهم على المغادرة وعدم العودة، ويصاب من يصاب ويتسلق قوارب الصيد الناجون غير مكترثين بحمولة القارب المفترضة. فالخيارات أصبحت محدودة: إما البقاء والموت برصاص العصابات الصهيونية، أو ركوب القوارب ومواجهة خطر الغرق في البحر. ولأن والدي كان تاجرا مرموقا في يافا وله العديد من المعارف والاتصالات، وقد تمكن من حجز قارب تجاري مع ريس ماهر في الميناء، واستطعنا أن نركب القارب مع آخرين بهدوء ونظام بعيدا عن جموع الناس الهاربة بجلدها. في الميناء ربط والدي فردتي حذائه برباطهما ووضعهما حول رقبته، ثم ساعد أمي لتركب القارب وصار يحملنا واحدا واحدا ويمشي في الماء الذي كان يتجاوز ركبتيه ليصل إلى القارب الراسي على بعد 6 أمتار من الشاطئ، وتستلمنا أمي منه. وأخيرا حمل الحقيبة على كتفه عاليا وأعطاها للريس وتسلق القارب ليجلس قرب أمي. شارفت الشمس على الغروب فرسمت لوحة رائعة من مشتقات اللون الأحمر في الأفق البعيد غير آبهة بمأساتنا وبتشردنا. جلسنا في القارب نستمع إلى لطمات الأمواج على جانبي وهمهمات نقرات القوارب من حولنا. لا حاجة بالكلام لأنه لا يوجد ما يقال. كنا على شبيل مستقبل مجهول، لم نفهم تماما ما الذي يحصل لنا ولماذا علينا أن نترك بيتنا وكل ما هو مألوف لنا. شخصت عيوننا نحو الأفق الممتد إلى ما لا نهاية، خوفا وألما وبالقليل القليل من الأمل.
Thank you so much, تغريد. That's a very moving passage from the book. I want to ask you, because at the beginning you made reference to the fact that this is not a biographical, it's not a biographical novel. It's inspired by the experiences of a lot of people who had to leave Palestine in 1948. And I know another of your books is sort of inspired by a real person, but the events, I imagine, are completely imaginary. So when you're writing books of this sort, what sort of process do you follow? Do you, in order to keep this sort of balance or this border between, reality and fiction?
I think the idea of the book or the story is like a seed that makes me build a whole story around it. So the other book that you mentioned, which is Sit al-Kul, it was inspired also by a real person. Her name is Madeleine Kallab, and she is a fisherwoman, the only fisherwoman in Gaza. I listened to a recording on BBC, I think it was on BBC, about Madeleine, and I thought this would be a great story. But I didn't want to write her actual story. I wanted the freedom to be able to change the facts as much as I wanted. And that's how I used her story to write about a lot of things about Gaza and about what was happening there and how the young people in Gaza were reacting to all of this. So this is the process. It just, helps me to build a story around it. But I don't really have to be very factual about everything. I'm factual about the background, about the historical facts, but not about the personal things that are going on.
Thank you very much, Tagreed, for the reading and for the answer. So now we're going to move over to Márיה Dعدوش. I will do a brief introduction. Márיה Dعدوش is a Syrian author and screenwriter. Early in her writing career, she wrote for the famous TV comedy series Márيا and helped to establish BILA magazine, where she wrote hundreds of stories. She studied creative writing at the University of California, Los Angeles, where she was granted the Claire Carmichael Scholarship and won the non-traditional student story contest. So now she focuses all her effort on writing for children and young adults, and in the past few years has written around 50 books. Her YA novels have won a number of awards. This includes the Qattara Prize for the Planet of the Uncertainties in 2018, the Abdelhamid Shuman Prize for I Want Golden Eyes in 2019, and I believe that was recently published in Arabic. And in 2020, she won the Khalifa Educational Award for The Heart is Right Behind the Ribs. She has also instructed on a massive open online course, what's known as a MOOC, and the topic was on how to write a picture book. And it was attended or accessed by more than 40,000 learners. In her endeavor to empower Arabic, Da'doush has been given writing workshops and takes pride in having helped create 26 debut books written by 25 women authors. So over to you, Márיה. Tell us what you'll be reading. You're on mute. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry for this. So thank you, Susan, for the brief bio. Today I will be reading from my science fiction novel, I Want Golden Eyes. The story takes place at the end of this century in Comoros Islands, an Arab country not many of us ever heard of. Like in most of science fiction literature, my novel is another harbinger of the dreadful effects of placing the excessive power of science in the wrong hands. more. And so had a high IQ. The less fortunate leaders came that the part where today I'll be reading from the part where my protagonist, Diala, along with her father and sister, are heading to the gigantic elevator that will take them up to the surface to Quartzia, where they work at Professor Adams' house. I forgot to mention that the limiteds are denied the right to read. And where we're reading today, Diala is trying to go past the checkpoint with a stolen book.
Mm-hmm.
So I will read now.
Thank you.
Okay, the Griffin guards were clones. Scientists had given them a human brain and winged arms that ended in claws. Many of them carried a whip and would use it whenever necessary, or even when not necessary. Their faces were nasty folds of raw skin. They might have a nose, a mouth, eyes, or ears, but my eyes could never make any of that. It was our turn to be scanned, and I felt my guts twist. I had smuggled hundreds of books, but I still couldn't get over the fear I felt every time I went through the checkpoint. They ran the device over Baba's forehead, then Dima's, and then it was my turn. I stood inside the purple circle, and the laser ray passed over my forehead and our foreheads. On the day we were born, the government implanted a chip that carried all our information, our names, the names of our parents, and of course, our intelligence score. Then the gleaming red curtain that had been blocking my path rose up, and the way to the elevators was clear. I resisted the urge to touch the book hidden in the waistband of my pants as I passed the last Griffin guard near the elevator. I repeated to myself, the pages of the book won't move and the sonar won't see it, as I tried to ignore the icy fear that had crept into my fingertips. I mustered a confidence that I did not really feel, taking sure steps as I moved past them until I reached the closed elevator door, where Baba and Dima were waiting for me, along with hundreds of other limiteds. Today, like other days, the bat didn't suspect a thing. Today, like other days, I succeeded in stealing the book, and tomorrow would be another day. The elevator finally got there, and the disembodied artificial intelligence voice said, "The elevator has arrived. Please proceed in an orderly fashion. The doors will close in 10, 9, 8. These machine artificial intelligence voices really got on my nerves. I stepped into the elevator with Dima and Baba in a wave of people before our aerogel chamber glided onto the powerful nanorod that would take us up. If a media parachute ever flew close to my face and asked about the happiest moments of my life, I wouldn't have to give it even 1 second's thoughts. I would look at the parachute camera and give a big smile, and I'd say, without missing a beat, those 38 seconds that I spent on the elevator every morning on my way to Quartzia. I had a strange habit. When I rode the elevator each morning, I looked toward the spot of light in the glass dome up top, pierced through by the rod. And as the elevator capsule got closer and closer to it, I would imagine that this was my last trip on the elevator and that the rest of my life would be up above there in Quartzia. When would that come true? So I finished reading. Ironically, Diala's wish that day came true, but unfortunately, that proved to be the worst thing that ever happened to her.
So if you want to find out what happens, you have to read the translated version of the book. Hopefully.
Yeah. Actually, the University of Austin now is translating this novel, and thank you to Marcia Links. She's doing great job translating.
Wonderful. Do you have any idea when the book will be out for our audience?
I think it's by the end of the year, I hope.
Perfect. Perfect.
Inshallah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Maria, I want to ask you, we know that when somebody's writing speculative fiction, a very important part of writing the book is coming up with the world and with all the
Yeah.
rules.
Yeah.
So in the case of this book, how did that happen? Especially since you are basing it not on an imaginary place, but a place that exists in reality. What was the process you went through?
Well, writing from the Arab world can be really challenging, especially if you're writing a science fiction story. So I tried hard to, depict Arabic details. First, geographically, I had to describe the Karthala volcano. Even I named my protagonist Diyala. Karthala. Diyala is an Arabic name, an old tribe name, and Karthala is the name of the volcano. I used famous poets' verses like for Nizar Abani, وللحب رائحة تفوح. I know I can't remember the verse well now, but it's a famous one, that world. And even when I talked about singers, I used Fairuz and Sabah al-Fakhri, the names of Arabic songs. Even when they cursed, they used Arabic curses like Allah la yawafqak or something like that. The romantic relationship that allied Diyala with Raji, who played Da'ud, by the way, an Arabic instrument, was the shy kind, to comply with the Arab mentality and Arab customs when dealing for this. So yes, I tried to localize, if I can say, my science fiction story, but it was challenging because a science fiction in the Arab world isn't really. You need to work hard to convince the reader that this is really happening in Al Comoros, and at the end of this century.
Okay. Thank you very much, Maria. So we're going to move to our third participant. Ahmed Salah al-Mahdi is an Egyptian author, translator, and literary critic who specializes in fantasy, science fiction, and children's literature. He also writes for children's magazines. His two novels that have been translated to English are the YA novel Reem and the science fiction thriller Malaz. Is that correct?
Yes.
He's also published a picture book. So Ahmed, if you could just tell us which book you're reading from and a general idea about the book.
The novel is Reem into the Unknown. And the subtitle was added only in the English translation, because in Arabic, the reader would understand what is Reem. It's a girl name, so what's the story? Okay. But in English, I felt that it won't have the same weight, so I added Into the Unknown, and it's actually a name of the chapter in the novel, في غمار المجهول. And I found this subtitle tell exactly what this novel about. A lot of unknowns in the story. So it's about Saif, a young man, normal man, live normal life. So one day he decides to buy a pet. So he found this black cat. The seller told him that no one wants to buy a black cat. He said, "Oh, he's lonely like me, so I will buy him." And it turned out to be the worst decision of his life. So he got tangled into this dark world that no one knows about, like witchcraft and magic. And actually, the true protagonist of the story is Reem, the young girl. She lives with his grandmother because his parents died in a car accident. So she lives with her, but she tried to understand what's happening. Her grandmother disappeared for some time, and there is some mystery around her. So she discovers that her grandmother is a witch. So surprise. So when Saif found Reem, she already knew that her grandmother is a witch, and she tried to escape, and her grandmother got her back and imprisoned her in the house with this black cat as a watcher or some kind. And she tried to get rid of the black cat, and then Saif bought the cat, and he returned with the cat to the witch hut, and the story is complete circle. So the part I'm about to read is when Reem discovered that his grandmother is a witch, and she thinking about escaping. Then she tried to learn what is this magic about. Okay, so I will read in Arabic, and here we go. مرت الأيام على ريم كئيبة، ولم تعد تتكلم أو تفعل شيئا سوى الجلوس والصمت. أخذت تفكر في الهرب، ولكن كيف؟ وأين تذهب؟ ثم قالت لنفسها أنها إن أرادت الهرب فيجب عليها أولا التخلص من القط الأسود. وأصابتها هذه الفكرة بالحماس والدافع لفعل شيء بدلا من الجلوس والاكتئاب. كان هناك مكتبة خشبية في ردهة البيت، وتبدو الكتب مرصوصة بنظام داخلها متناقضة مع البيت الذي تطوله يد الإهمال. ولم تقترب ريم من تلك الكتب من قبل، ولكنها فكرت في أن تلقي عليها نظرة بينما جدتها بالخارج. لم يبدو للقط أن ما تفعله غريبا، فتساءب وهو يمط قائمتيه الأماميتين واستلقى أمامها، بينما جلست هي على الأرض وهي تحمل أحد المجلدات القديمة جذبته من المكتبة الخشبية، وقد اصفر ورقه من أثر مرور الزمن عليه. كانت الأوراق مليئة بالرموز الغريبة والرسومات التي لم تفهم معناها، وبعد ذلك أدركت أن هذه الكتب تخص السحر والوصفات السحرية وأشياء أخرى غريبة. لم يعد لديها شك أن جدتها ساحرة كما أخبرتها. أثار ما قرأته شغفها، وزاد من خوفها من جدتها في الوقت ذاته. فهي تنتمي لعالم غريب عنها، وتمنت لو تقدر أن تستعيد حياتها القديمة الطبيعية مع والديها، ولكن هذا بدا حلما بعيد المنال. انقضت الأيام التالية وريم مستغرقة بين هذه الكتب، يحركها الفضول والشغف والرغبة في التعلم، وأحيانا كانت تخبئ كتابا في غرفتها دون أن تشعر جدتها كي تقرأه مساء، وقد أغلقت على نفسها باب غرفتها. أصبحت ريما مسحورة بهذا العالم الغريب عنها، وانتابتها مشاعر مختلطة ومضطربة ما بين الانبهار والخوف. وهكذا مرت عليها الأيام وهي مستغرقة في تلك الفنون الغريبة، حتى جاء يوما من الأيام على ريما شيئا آخر أثار حماسها. وقد عثرت على كتاب ووجدت جدتها تخبئه في درج سري في مكتبتها. اكتشفت ريم بالصدفة وهي تفتش بين الكتب. كان كتابا قديما، وقد ارتسمت عليها صورة قط أسود قديم منجومة مخيفة. أثار الغلاف خوفها وفضولها في الوقت ذاته، وتمنت أن يكون للكتاب علاقة بالقط الأسود. وهكذا خبأت الكتاب أسفل سريرها حتى المساء، وعندما أحست أن جدتها قد بطلت في النوم أخرجت الكتاب من أسفل سريرها وأشعلت شمعة لتستطيع رؤية الكلمات، وانهمكت في قراءة الكتاب وهي تلتهم حروفه. كان الكتاب يتعلق بالخادم الذي تحتميه الساحرة، والذي عادة ما يكون قطا أسود، وأنواع السحر والتعويذ المختلفة التي يمكن ممارستها عليه. فهمت ريم أخيرا السحر التي مارسته جدتها على القط الأسود، وهو نوع من التعويذ يسمى سحر التتبع، ومن خلاله تستطيع الساحرة أن تجعل القط الأسود يراقب شخصا ما ولا يتخلى عن مراقبته أبدا. أخذت ريم تبحث بحماس عن الحل للتخلص من هذا السحر، وعرفت أن الحل الوحيد للتخلص منه هو أن يقوم شخص ما باقتناء هذا القط بالإرادة. بس.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. That's very fascinating. I hope that will encourage people to either read it in Arabic or English. And the English translation is available. You can buy it on wherever you buy books, so as not to promote one online marketplace. Ahmed, what I find very fascinating, when I was doing my thesis, I did an experiment. So I would go and during book fairs, I would talk to booksellers and I would ask them, when young people come up to you to ask about certain books, which books are they really interested in? And sometimes they wouldn't take a second to think. They would think horror. And it's not just, Egyptian young people, it's people in the Gulf, all over the Arab region. And I always wondered, why do you think that is? And maybe starting with you yourself as a horror fan, what is it that attracts you to horror?
When I was very young, سألت people in my town, I would say in Upper Egypt, tell a story about jinn and ghosts and supernatural, and they are not just stories, they are telling us facts from their perspective. So it's very interesting to find that jinn can take a shape in real life and do something and harm someone. So for people, this is not just a fiction, it's part of our life. So me, when I was young, I was 5 or 6 years old, and a lot of my family kids and other kids in the neighborhood would gather around one of the elder people, and she usually an elder woman, and listen to stories about jinn and other horrors, and it was very fascinating. And I felt terrified but excited at the same time. I liked this, and I always come to listen to more. So it's something in our nature, I guess. We love the supernatural.
Mhm.
And my grandmother used to tell me folk tale, not exactly horror, some of magic and heroes and Shatar Hassan, Sit Husn al-Jamal, something like that. She once told me about the story of a young lady who was kidnapped by a ghoul, and she has a long hair that he can use to climb up it. When I grew up and find Tangled or Rapunzel, I was how my grandmother knew about that. So it's the fairy tales and folk tales from all around the world is connected. I found that when I read, I have a collection of fairy tales from all around the world, Europe and Asia and Africa, and I found very, very similar stories, a lot of similar stories from all around the world. And that is why I tried to do in Reem. Reem has some elements of the Egyptian folk tales and some of the European folk tales elements, like the witch in the hut and the black cat and something. And also in Egypt, the black cat is considered something of it's a jinn or something supernatural. So I made this connection in Reem. It's not exactly Egyptian folk tale, but or Western folk tale. It's a mix.
Okay, thank you so much, Ahmed. So now that we've done all the readings, I'm going to ask some questions to all the members of the panel. And this question was inspired by something Tagreed told me when I interviewed her for my thesis, where you said that writing is two things. On the one hand, it's the thing that the writer themselves care about or are interested in or are worried about. But on the other, you're aware of your reader as a young person and you're trying to give them something, either something they need or something they want. So I want to ask each of our authors, when you write, which is the part that comes from you, your own interests, and which is the part where you're trying to meet the needs of young people? So if we could start with just maybe the same order, Tagreed, Márיה, and then Ahmed, if possible.
Okay.
You're on mute, Tagreed.
Okay. I think that it's very important that when a writer writes, they write about a subject that they are fascinated with, or that's something in their mind. And I found out that this is what I do all the time, that there's an idea that I want to get across, that I feel emotional about. But then when I start to write it, then I have to think about my audience, and not just about my getting catharsis, getting out what I feel. So I include a lot of things in the novel that relates to them and that makes them feel that this is about their interests too, not just my interest. And I think when you feel strongly about something, you come across as genuine to the reader, and the reader feels that and reacts with that. So that's my experience of it.
Thank you. Márיה? You're on mute.
Sorry. So only one of my five adult novels where like I chose to write what I wanted to write about. but the rest were triggered or dictated by either words or by publishers who contracted me to write about drugs or something. But I was lucky, it coincided that the topics I wrote about were interesting to young readers, to young people, I mean. In fact, they were most curious about, I wrote about drugs, schizophrenia, social injustices, even more. But on another note, I believe that if I'm a good writer, I can write, if I'm assigned a subject, whether appealing to young people or not, I can still manage, if I'm a good writer, to get their attention and applause by honestly depicting my young characters' human experiences, because the human experiences are universal, right? So this is, my 2 cents.
Okay. And do you sometimes find that sometimes when you are given some constraints, they can actually help you to be a bit creative?
Well, it's, limits are always bad.
Okay.
It's always good, yeah. It's always good to feel free to write whatever, you feel like writing about.
Okay. Ahmed?
Okay, I want to admit that I write for myself first. I write what I think I will enjoy to read. I used to read a lot when I was young. I know what I really loved back there when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. So when I write something now, I ask myself, would I really enjoy it if I read it back then? And till this day, I enjoy reading the books that is written for kids and young adults. I really like Alice in Wonderland and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. These novels, till this day, I really love reading them. So when I have an idea and I want to write it, I ask myself first, will you enjoy reading it? So I think if I enjoy it, I hope the reader, the young adults will enjoy it too.
So you're writing, sorry.
Yes.
If I'm allowed to add
Yes,
something, it's young adult literature is only YA literature if it does appeal to age 8 to 88.
Okay.
So what Ahmed saying is true. Yeah, I've seen very old people in the parks reading the last sequel of Harry Potter, 80 years old baby. And I've seen very young readers, like 8 years old or 7 years old, enjoying that book. So I think, yeah, what's Ahmed saying is very true.
Okay. I wanted to ask you something else, which is, like we said, there isn't, like we have a long history of Arabic YA, but there hasn't been a lot of it. So what I'm really interested in is that in forming you individually as authors, what were the experiences that formed you? Maybe it was books you enjoyed reading, or maybe it was particular training workshops that you attended that you felt is forming you, and that as you go along, you're developing more and more as writers. So yeah, we can start with any one of you, whoever wants to. Okay, maybe I will choose then. No problem. Okay. So maybe if we can start with you, Maria.
Okay. So allow me to start with the influence of my personal experiences. I'm Syrian. I lived most of my life in Syria. I'm a first-hand witness of the war. And this did have a direct influence on at least one of my novels, The Planet of Absurdities. I think the context played a major role in why this particular novel was rewarded the Katara Award. My protagonist, Naya, suffered from PTSD because she witnessed the death of both of her parents during a bombing or a shelling in Aleppo. And in my novel, I tried to depict the Syrian mechanisms of coping with war conditions. On the other hand, I had a very pleasant, happy, vibrant childhood. So this is why my books for younger age are very humorous and funny. Yeah. So yes, personal experiences do have their effects on our books. As for what really authors or books did have influence on me, my favorite author is Cormac McCarthy, and his favorite book is The Road. Also, I love Ties by Domenico Starnone. It's a very famous and great Italian author, and this book was translated by the Pulitzer winner Lumpa Lahiri to English. Yeah, and I think it was even translated to Arabic and called Arbita or Silat or something. Yeah, Arabic authors that had influence on me or has influence on me. Huda Barakat, with her book, Booker Award winner, Barid al-Layl. Yeah.
Okay. So we can see that it's sort of literary influences of all sorts, whether they're for children or for adults, as well as personal experiences.
Yeah. Of course, along with my instructors at the university, I was very, very lucky to have the greatest instructors ever. Yeah. So I should be thankful for them forever. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
Robert Eversers, yeah, and Adam Prince, and Beth, yeah, and Beth Bauman. Yeah.
Thank you. So if we can hear from Tagreed.
Well, kind of old-fashioned, I think. The books that really affected me as a child were the classics, I think. Enid Blyton, The Fives, Secret Seven, and before that, when we were kids, we used to read the unabridged Charles Dickens books. I don't know how we managed to understand them. They were that thick, and we could read and understand them. And I think all these stories really had a very, very good effect on me and wanted me to write. They were exciting, and I wanted to write about books that were similar and gave as much pleasure to kids as I got from them reading them. And basically, reading was what made me want to write. As you know, I started writing picture books, and later on moved to young adult books. So it took me a while to progress to the young adult genre.
Okay, Ahmed?
Okay, when I was very young, I used to read the books of a series called Al-Maktaba Al-Khadra. It was
grew up reading those.
Very amazing. Okay, everyone knows that. It was fascinating. What drove me to read was my grandmother fairy tales, so I looked for more, and I found them in Al-Maktaba Al-Khadra. Then I came across the series of the روايات مصرية للجيب, Egyptian novels, pocket novels, very short novels or novellas. The books of Dr. Nabil Farouk and Ahmed Khalid Tawfiq, رحمهم الله, affected me a lot. I liked the science fiction and espionage novels of Dr. Nabil Farouk. I liked the horror and supernatural elements with Dr. Ahmed Khalid Tawfiq. And they both were the gate for the older authors, like Dr. Nabil Farouk was my gate to Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, and Dr. Ahmed Khalid Tawfiq was the gate to Lovecraft and Edgar Allan. And I actually began writing when I was 13 years old. I was inspired by Dr. Nabil Farouk. I wrote a story about an Egyptian scientist who created something, and CIA wanted to assassinate him, and they actually did it. And there was car chasing and bullets and so. My second attempt at writing a novel, the next year I was 14 years old, and I was inspired by Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. I wrote a story about a society of wizards living in a hideout from society like in Harry Potter, but I created my own world and I own my own map, like the Middle Earth. And from there, I began writing, exploring, and trying a lot of new ideas. And actually, Malaise, that was published in 2017, the idea came to me when I was in high school, 26, 27, something like that. And I kept editing and changing the idea until I came to the idea of Malaise, City of Resurrection. So the Egyptian pocket novels was the biggest factor in my life as a leader and as a writer.
Okay, there's a question from the audience, which is, can we think now of something that's the equivalent of those pocket novels? Or maybe like the Maktaba al-Khadra, which we read over.
If there is a publisher who can
bring people together.
Bring together those great children and YA authors. We want to make something like Al-Maktaba al-Khadra. I hope we can make something like that someday. And I have 3 ideas. Okay.
Okay, perfect. We're looking forward to that, Ahmed.
You're already.
You already started. We have some questions.
I do a bit. Yeah,
yes,
I a bit. I disagree or have another opinion. I think Maktaba al-Khadra, from my perspective, think it's outdated now. I'm not sure if children will be as impressed to read them as we used to. I think today's children are more into horror, tension, Harry Potter, and Percy Jackson. Yeah, all these fast-paced, realistic fiction. I think so. Yeah. So if the person or the audience, the one who asked about a similar series, I don't think we have as widespread series as they used to, but we do have. Tagreed has a series, a whole early reader series called Da'dun. And also I have a series for age 9 called Taymo Sami, and younger age 8 called Karma Karamilla. Yeah, but I can't think of other series.
Yeah. There's a question to both Tagreed and Mariya, because some of your books you deal with quite difficult topics, so things like war, displacement, PTSD, drug addiction. So what do you feel is the best way to handle such sensitive topics? So if we can start with Mariya and then move to Tagreed.
Well, that's a tough one. Yeah, I do lots of researches, like for months and months, and I keep interviewing people and experts and teenagers who experience this kind of traumas or what the topic we're talking about. And this is how we get to learn where the sensitive areas are and try to approach delicately, I think. Yeah.
So research. And like you said, going about it very carefully.
Yep.
Yes.
Tagreed.
Yes, Tagreed.
Like Mariya, I do a lot of research, and some of the research I do it when I have a novel about certain things. But the novel, the subjects that I choose are kind of, I was a little bit worried whether teenagers would be interested in what I'm writing, especially because there's this political element and there's no, about what's happening. But a lot of them these stories are not just about Palestine, they're about a lot of displacement that happens in the Arab world and a lot of problems that are similar, that people will relate to when they read these books. And I found out that they were very much needed by the YA. They were serious, and when you address teenagers with respect and with knowledge, they react accordingly. And a lot of the information there makes them understand what's going on around them, because you can't escape that. You can't really protect them from what is going. Some of them, it's their family history too that is being related with stories. So, and the way to do it is to do it really factually, and at the same time through a human interest story. So it's not just information or just trying to rile them up, but just telling them a story about real people and what's happening to them. So that's how I do it.
Okay. This brings us something both Maria and Tagreed raised earlier, where we're talking about young Arab readers and what they want. And in your opinion, what is it they want from the literature that, that addresses them?
Who do you want to ask?
Maybe start with Ahmed this time.
About time.
Okay, I think a lot of the ideas today in the day of internet, children nowadays know a lot of things that they don't need books to learn them. They already know a lot of things about the world around them. So trying to think about a new idea for a book is challenging nowadays. We want to impress the young reader. So I think you need to keep a step ahead of the trends. You don't want to chase trends. You need to take a step ahead of them. Like Maria said, I don't think the folktale holds the same weight as it was for us when 20 years ago. But I think they still hold some magic. I experimented with translating a lot of short stories. I published them on my page on Facebook, and I found a lot of young readers and parents who told me that we read these short stories that you translate to our younger kids. So I think we can do a mix of bringing the old idea. You can reimagine them. You can reimagine the story of Red Riding Hood. But if Red Riding Hood is not in the old day, it's in the current age. What would it be like to have a stranger following you and you are going to your grandmother's house in the day of the internet? Would you use your cell phone or the internet? So the next thing I would like to do is creating the new worlds. Like in fantasy or science fiction, you can build a new society on a new planet. You can present new ideas to the reader. So either we create a new world or take an old one and reimagine.
Okay. In addition to the Arab young reader, because a lot of you either have been translated or they will have translated editions of their works coming out soon. What is it you would like for readers beyond the Arab region to get from your books? I mean, keeping in mind, maybe some of those who will read in English will be people of Arab heritage as well. So this is also addressed to all three authors. What would you like those reading in English to get from your books?
I can start. If my work should be translated to other societies, I'd like others to realize that all universal feelings and human experiences do apply to Arabs like they do to other societies. I believe that if I'm a good writer, I can portray our local stories and still manage to get other societies applause by honestly depicting my characters' human experiences, because human experiences are the same. The media always portray Arabs unfairly, and I would want other societies to see us for who we really are, our dark sides, our brighter ones, our fears and dreams and plans and worries and struggles. I think knowing others bridge the gaps between societies, and this is what I want, why I want my word to be translated, and what I want from other audiences.
Thank you, Maria. So we'll hear from Tagreed, then finish up with Ahmed.
Okay. I agree totally with Maria. If our books are translated or when they're translated, we are, I hope that the other culture that's reading them will understand more about us and accept, just like we did. We read a lot of foreign literature as we were kids. We know all about the culture, we know, and we feel that it's great to know little things about these people and how they react and what they think and all that. And in the literature that I write, I mean, the stories that are written, which are about certain political things that are happening. As Maria says, we've been very misunderstood, and our story is not out there. And I always feel that if our story is out there in other languages, it will really, for the new generation, they will understand what we're going through. They'll see us human beings with the same aspirations and the same fears and going through different experiences. هذا بياع الغاز.
It's your Ahmed this time.
As some sound effects or the atmosphere.
Exactly.
We're talking about culture, and so
yes.
Welcome to Egypt.
Yeah, here comes the answer.
Okay. Tagreed, did you have anything else to say? Sorry.
No, that's mostly it. No, I just was wondering about the story of Anne Frank's. Take that for an example, the diaries of Anne Frank's. Millions and millions of copies were published all over, and her story and what happened in the Holocaust is read by school children everywhere. So, I mean, our story, I would like that also to get through so that people read and understand what is going through, what we're going through.
Thank you, Tagreed. And finally, Ahmed, what is it that you would like people to get, non-Arab people or non-Arab readers, to get from your books?
Okay, literature is a bridge between different cultures. I hope to break some boundaries. A lot of people don't know much about Egypt rather than the pyramids and some the famous monuments. But there is a lot to the Egyptian culture, and I like to present it in the stories. My novel Malaz is set in the far future, but it holds a lot of the elements of the Egyptian spirit, if I may say, and even I presented the ancient Egyptian religion in the future. So I want to give more information about it. I researched it and even used some words and mentioned their meaning. So even for the Arabic reader, if you read the story, he will learn that the word Saya, the name of one of the characters in the story, means knowledge. Okay, so the non-Arabic reader also will learn something about that. There is a lot of gods that Egyptian worshipped in the ancient days. So I mentioned some of them and their place in the pantheon of gods in the ancient Egypt. So I want to present more about my culture to the other readers who can learn from it, learn about it from my.
Okay, so I think that brings us up to 6 o'clock here, 7, 8, it's different times in different places. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank all the audience members. I want to thank our 3 authors for a wonderful hour. We wish you the best of luck getting translated more and more and more, and writing more. And I know that some of you also are carrying out the role to encourage younger authors to get into the field. So thank you all very much, and thank you to our audience.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, thank you for hosting us. Thank you, Tagreed, Ahmed. Bye-bye.
I enjoyed my
you.
time here. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Ahmed.
Thank you very much. Bye bye, everyone.